So we've all heard that breeding crested geckos is easy, and while that might be true, there's still some things that we need to consider before we jump into breeding. Not only are we going to talk about how to breed crested geckos, but we're also going to talk about things that are going to set you up for success in the future. But we are not here to tell you whether you should or shouldn't be a crested gecko breeder. That is ultimately your decision. I'm not here to change your mind. I'm just here to set some realistic expectations. So let's get into number one. How do you breed crested geckos? So there's really two different ways that you can pair. You can keep them in an enclosure and essentially cohab the male and the female through mating season. This is not the process that I recommend, and especially for new breeders. Several things can go wrong when you're breeding crested geckos. The male can prolapse, the male and the female could get a little bit too aggressive with each other, and if they are cohab, chances are that your male is going to scale back on eating and lose some weight. And as a new crested gecko breeder, you should really set yourself up to be able to monitor them at all times. And this just isn't possible when you have them in an enclosure together overnight. So what I recommend, when you have your two mature adults, grab a tub, put some paper towels in the bottom, and this part is important. Get a spray bottle and spray the walls of the tub. This is going to provide moisture, but it's also going to prevent the geckos from climbing up the walls. And then we're gonna do a light mist on the paper towels. Now we're not gonna leave them in here for a long time, so that's okay. It's just gonna help the male retract his hemipenes if a lock does happen, and further prevent a prolapse. So we're gonna put the two geckos in here, we're gonna dim the lights, we're gonna light a candle, I'm just kidding. We're gonna dim the lights, put the lid on it, and within about 10 or 15 minutes, you're gonna have an idea of whether or not they're going to lock. Now it is important to note that both geckos do need to be receptive. The male is going to try to latch on to the neck of the female, but if the female is trying to bite back and run away, it's a good indicator that the female is probably not ready yet. You should pull them apart and try again later. You should never try to force the situation or leave them in there longer than you have to for a potential pairing. Now a typical lock is going to take anywhere from 2 minutes to 15 minutes. I've had geckos lock up for a little over 15 minutes, but they are going to be pretty still during the process. Once they're done mating, they're going to split apart and you're going to visibly see that the male has his hemipene exposed, at which time he's going to start licking it to get it to retract. Don't freak out, this is normal. Now at this point, I typically remove the female and I'll leave the male in the bin until he is fully retracted. And this part's important because you want to monitor him and make sure that he doesn't have a prolapse, and in my opinion, this is the best way to do it. And generally, this process is going to take anywhere from 10 minutes to an hour. So the next thing we need to talk about is which geckos do you pair? Well, this is very, very important, especially for a new breeder. You need to breed with a purpose. You need to have a focus and you need to have goals. And I know this might sound ridiculous and you don't really want to hear it, but if you just take two geckos and pair them together, I promise you, you're going to regret it later. While it might be a lot of fun to hatch out your first few geckos, after about 6-7 months when you have 10 baby geckos and nobody's buying them and you can't move them and they're now your forever pets, it can become pretty frustrating and ultimately leading you to giving up on the breeding process altogether. So instead of grabbing two random geckos, try to find a gap in the market or a morph that you might feel is undervalued. For example, if you go to Morph Market and you see 2,000 extreme Harleys and you only see 20 Super Dals and you really like working with Super Dals, well, I think your answer is pretty clear. But it's also important that you start with quality over quantity, because one real quality pair of geckos is going to yield you not only a higher profit, but it's also going to give you a better reputation within the community, leading to more trust for potential future buyers, as opposed to pairing up 10 low quality geckos that you might get, 20 or 40 bucks per baby. If there's anything we don't need any more of in this hobby, it's $20 or $30 crested gecko babies. And ultimately, this leads to your primary focus, selling geckos on rehoming groups and rehoming sites, or sites like Craigslist and Facebook, and this is not where you want to be. Do not make this your home. It's okay to utilize this for sales and to pick up some local buyers, but by no means do you want this to be your primary source of moving your geckos. So start small, start with quality, and have a focus. The next thing we're going to talk about real quick is timelines from pairing your gecko to selling the offspring. But real quick, if there's one thing that we can both agree on, it's that your feed isn't showing you enough reptile content. So let's make it a win-win. Hit that subscribe button and drop a like for more Crested Gecko content. So when you pair two mature adult geckos together, you're going to expect your first set of eggs anywhere between 30 and 60 days, given that the lock was successful. Now, some females can retain sperm for a very long time, so that timeline isn't set in stone, but generally speaking, you can expect between 30 and 60 days to your first clutch of eggs. Crested geckos lay 2 eggs per clutch. Once in a great while, you might only get 1 egg, but if you do get 1 egg, you just need to make sure that the female isn't retaining the other egg. And after she lays her first set of eggs, it's going to be another 30 to 40 days between clutches. And this will go on until she stops laying, which could be anywhere from 10 eggs to I've had females go as far as 30 eggs from one pairing, which is probably not typical, but it can happen, so you need to be prepared for that. So once the eggs are laid and you've collected them, the next step is incubating. I incubate my eggs around 74 or 75 degrees. I put mine on wet vermiculite. You can also use perlite, or you can use the Pangea hatch. The substrate really doesn't matter. Any of those 3 will work. You'll put them in a deli cup with some holes punched in the side, and just make sure that the substrate for the egg does not dry out. Now, from laying to hatching, we're looking anywhere from 60 to 120 days, but typically it's going to fall right in that 90-day area. And once those babies hatch, then we have about 3 months between the time of hatching to the time that you can start selling them. I do not recommend selling them any younger than really 6 months, but if you absolutely have to, do not go less than 3 months. This will allow time for you to establish them on both Crested Gecko diet, live insect, make sure that they are shedding appropriately, make sure that they are hydrated, pooping, and just making sure that you're providing the next person a healthy gecko. Because after all, your reputation is everything. You don't want to provide somebody a gecko that's going to fail to thrive. That will come back on you. So for an overall timeline from the time you start your first pairing to your first sale, you're looking at close to just under a year. Once you get started, it is a long process to making your first sale. So it's just something that you need to understand, that there's a lot of care that is going to go into this and a lot of time between pairing your gecko and selling its first baby. And also consider, once your first clutch hatches, it's going to be almost every 30 days after that you're going to get 2 more geckos. So essentially, if you only paired 1 pair of geckos, you're going to have anywhere from 6 to 12 babies before you make your first sale. And this is important to consider to make sure that you are well prepared to handle the capacity of 12 new Crested Geckos before any leave. Then let's hit on ethical breeding just really quickly, because it is an important topic. I know that it might be boring to some of you, but we need to make sure that we are breeding ethically. Knowing that you might have anywhere from 12 to 20 to 30 babies means that you have to be prepared to take care of those 30 babies, and not just in the mindset of how can I do this in the most cost-efficient way, but how can I do this while providing quality of life to all of the geckos and not sacrificing ethics to save money or to profit. Now, we can make an entire video on just this topic alone, so we won't get too far into the weeds here. I just want you to know that please do not consider profit over ethics. And the last thing I'm going to leave you with, if you are planning to start breeding Crested Geckos, you need to start your social media now. Even though you might not be selling any babies until next year, start your media now. Get on Facebook, get on Instagram, get on TikTok, YouTube, whatever the case is, as many platforms as you can keep up with. Start posting pictures of your current reptiles, your current enclosures, your process, your progress, your future pairings, anything that you can do to get more eyes on your name, because in this business, your name means everything. The more trust you have, the more buyers you have. The better the reputation you have, the more buyers you have. And right now, let's not kid ourselves. The Crested Gecko market is completely oversaturated. So if you want to make your name and your dent in that market, it's going to be difficult and it's going to require a lot of work. So start that process now. Start it today. And I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you want to see a part 2, let me know in the comments, and we will see you guys in the next one.